After a ship wrecks, a woman is stuck on an island with her aggressive husband and an attractive man who obviously wants to be with her, and tensions between the two men rise as they all struggle to survive. Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be recapping the 2005 dramatic thriller Survival Island. A woman named Jennifer and her rich husband Jack are driving with their friends Bill and Gail as the group heads for a boat where they'll be spending a nice vacation. They arrive at the docks and meet the boat's captain and crew, including Manuel, the incredibly attractive deckhand. As everyone gets packed up and moved onto the boat, Manuel's ex-girlfriend shows up and begins arguing with him. The argument gets heated and she slaps Manuel, prompting him to hit her back before she storms off. On the boat that night, Jack offers Manuel a drink since he seems high-strung from the argument, but Manuel turns him down. Jack is offended by Manuel's tone and makes fun of him to their friends. The film then cuts to Manuel's ex as she performs a voodoo ritual and curses Manuel. Later that night, Jack and Jennifer sleep together that night, which irritates Manuel because he can hear them through the walls. While they sleep together, Jack keeps briefly seeing Manuel's ex on top of him instead of Jennifer, but he ignores it. With the ritual complete, Manuel's ex hits the doll and we see Manuel get a bloody nose, meaning that the doll is now connected to him. The next morning, Manuel serves some alcohol to the guests and Jack complains to the captain about his attitude. The captain goes to speak with Manuel in the kitchen, which leads to a heated argument. Manuel says he quits and storms off. After the captain leaves the kitchen, Manuel heads back in and pockets a pair of diving goggles. He then tosses a rag from his belt, not realizing that it landed on the oven and is catching fire. Everyone is out on the boat's deck fishing when Jennifer and Gail notice the smoke billowing from below deck. They alert the captain and he rushes in to find that the kitchen is completely engulfed in flames. He tries to extinguish the flames, but it's no use. Everyone abandons ship and packs into a small lifeboat. However, there's a huge storm that night and the lifeboat is damaged, forcing everyone to swim for their lives. Jennifer is able to make it to a deserted island and we see her taking shelter beneath a propped up boat. She sees a body floating in the ocean and rushes out to find that it's the captain's body. Manuel also arrives and he helps her try to resuscitate the captain, but it's too late. Using his goggles and a knife, Manuel is able to swim out into the ocean and kill fish for food. On the beach, Jennifer asks Manuel how long it will be until people come looking for them, and he tells her that it could be weeks or even months since no one knows they're missing yet. The two get into an argument when Jennifer asks if they can make a fire, and a frustrated Manuel points out that they have no way to start it. Manuel says they need to build a good shelter since they're going to be there a while, and the two work together to construct one. After they finish, Manuel suggests they go for a swim, but tells Jennifer not to swim in her bathing suit so that it won't be wet and cold when she tries to sleep in it. While swimming, Jennifer asks Manuel about his ex, and the two end up getting in an argument. Jennifer storms out of the ocean, and as she walks away from Manuel, makes crude comments about his body. That night, the two apologize to each other and promise to stop fighting. Manuel swims out into the reef to catch them some lobster the next day and ends up finding Jack barely alive on the shore. He helps Jack walk to their camp and Jennifer is overjoyed to see her husband. The two embrace and it's obvious that Manuel feels like a third wheel and is less than happy that Jack is there. Jack falls asleep in the shelter while Jennifer and Manuel go to hunt for food. Jack wakes up and sees them having a good time, which makes him suspicious and jealous. Using his lighter, Jack is able to start a fire for the group, and tensions begin to rise between him and Manuel. Manuel goes to swim, and Jack begins accusing Jennifer of having an affair with Manuel. This angers Jennifer, and she goes out for a swim as well. When she gets back, Jack apologizes and they make up. Later in the day, Jack gets Jennifer alone and tells her he thinks it's suspicious that Manuel had the foresight to grab goggles when the fire happened on the boat. Manuel then comes by and says that the water is murky, so he has to swim out further to get food, and Jack tells him to take Jennifer with him. Jennifer doesn't want to go, but Jack asks her to so that he can have some time alone to mourn for Bill and Gail, who are presumably dead. Jennifer and Manuel swim out and catch some food together. Manuel then hands Jennifer the goggles and tells her to look in the water. She sees a shark and scares herself, but Manuel assures her that they're not a threat. The two of them get get stung by jellyfish and swim back out to shore. When they get back to the camp, they find that Jack has dug up the body of the captain and stolen his clothes and cigars, as well as separated the camp into two parts, so that Manuel will have to sleep by himself. Jennifer asks Jack to show some respect, while Jack is still accusing her of lying to him about sleeping with Manuel. The three sit down for dinner later, and Jack makes jokes about Manuel's schooling. He then yells at Manuel to stay away from Jennifer, and the two get into a fight. Manuel tells Jack that he's on his own for food and water because he's sick of being disrespected. We then see Jack and Jennifer try and fail to get their own food, and Jennifer gets more and more frustrated with Jack's aggression towards Manuel. Eventually, Jack says he's going to go fish at the reef while Jennifer heads back to shore. She asks Manuel if he's mad at her too, and he tells her no, while offering her some fish he caught. Jennifer rejects the food at first because she doesn't want Jack to be mad at her, but she eventually takes it after making Manuel promise not to tell him. The two chat and flirt as Jack fishes in the reef and is able to catch a few fish. Jack shows his catch to Jennifer when he gets back, but notices a stick near Jennifer that she obviously used to eat fish already. He accuses her of accepting food from Manuel, but she lies and says that she stole it from him. Jack tells Manuel that Jennifer stole fish from him, but Manuel just replies that she doesn't have to steal because he would happily give it to her. The next day, we see them catching crabs and sea urchins for food when Jack notices that Manuel has somehow started his own fire. Realizing Manuel must have taken his lighter, he rushes over and gets into a fight with him. He kicks sand on Manuel's fire, so Manuel hits him with a stick. The two roll around and fight for a while until Manuel grabs his spear and threatens Jack to back off. Jack then accuses him of burning the ship down so that he could have Jennifer all to himself. Jack then steals the fish that Manuel caught and storms off back to their shelter. The next day, Jennifer tells Manuel that she can't take any more of his food and she can't be his friend. But Manuel just implies that he wants to be more than friends. Manuel then realizes that Jack stole his goggles to go fishing in the reef and charges off with his spear while saying that he's going to kill him. Jennifer tries to hold him back as he treks out into the sea, and eventually they end up falling together on the shore. Manuel pins Jennifer down, and the two eventually stop fighting and begin to sleep with each other. Meanwhile, Jack is able to catch a fish, but a shark comes by and tries to steal it off his spear. Jack manages to get away and keep his fish. Jennifer and Manuel finish sleeping with each other, and Jennifer begins to panic and makes Manuel promise not to say anything. When Jack gets back, he's excited to tell Jennifer about his encounter with the shark, and he tries to seduce her, but he can tell something is on her mind. He's eventually able to figure out that she slept with Manuel and is furious. He kicks her out of the shelter and drags her over to Manuel before storming off. Jennifer ends up crying on the ground as Manuel comforts her, and Jack permanently moves to another part of the island and fends for himself. Jennifer spends the next few days trying to find him, but she isn't successful. Jack is able to use materials to make a pair of goggles, allowing him to fish in the reef and provide for himself. Manuel tells Jennifer that she should stop thinking about Jack all the time, and the two begin to fight. Eventually, Manuel stops the fight and says that they should dance to lighten the mood. The two dance and look like they're having a great time as Jack secretly watches from afar. One day, Jack is out diving when he finds a small sunken boat. He hauls it up to shore, and Jennifer and Manuel run over to help him. He tells them to leave him alone and says that the boat is his. The next day, Manuel goes out to fish, and Jennifer goes over to talk to Jack as he repairs his boat. She asks him if he's really going to try and leave on it, and he confidently says yes. He then says that if she sleeps with him right now, then he'll let her get on it with him. But Jennifer just gets angry and storms off. That night, Jack tries to drive a wedge between Jennifer and Manuel by telling Manuel that Jennifer tried to beg beg him to let her on the boat. Jennifer and Manuel go swimming that night and sleep together in the water while Jack watches from the forest. Jennifer tells Manuel that they should steal the boat and abandon Jack on the island. The next day, Jack finishes building his boat and goes out to fish in the reef. While he's away, Jennifer and Manuel start stealing the boat, but Jack notices them and starts swimming back. The two are able to get out on the ocean before he can catch up to them, and they begin to make their escape. After sailing for a while, the boat begins to sink, and Jennifer realizes that Jack rigged the boat to fail in an attempt to kill them. They're forced to swim back to the island, but they get separated along the way. Back on the island, Jack has burned down Jennifer and Manuel's shelter and is enjoying himself when Jennifer makes it back to shore. When Manuel eventually washes up, Jack takes a spear and stabs Manuel in the back with it. Manuel swims off to safety while Jack captures Jennifer and ties her up. That night, Jack is taunting and threatening Jennifer when Manuel comes up from behind and attacks him with a branch. Jennifer is able to free herself and Manuel tosses Jack into the fire, giving the two of them time to escape. The film quickly cuts back to Manuel's ex, and we see that she's still doing voodoo magic, meaning she's the one that's been behind all of the bad things happening. The next day, Jennifer patches up Manuel's wounds, and Manuel says that they have to make weapons and fight. Jack, who has also made some weapons, tracks Jennifer and Manuel down and chases them through the woods. He eventually finds them hiding in a tree and throws a spear at them, causing Manuel to fall to the ground. Jack is about to kill him when Jennifer jumps onto Jack and distracts him. Manuel gets up and tries to kill Jack with a rock, however, he ends up falling back and impaling himself on Jack's spear. Simultaneously, we see his ex impale his voodoo doll on a toothpick in the same manner. The film then cuts forward several months, and a family comes to visit the island and find Jennifer sleeping in her shelter. They rescue her and bring her onto their boat, and as they drive away, they pass by Jack, who was out fishing. Jennifer doesn't say anything and leaves Jack behind, smiling at him as he watches her abandon him. Click one of the videos on screen for more.